thank you very much to the CEC for putting on this conference again. It's fabulous, and we know the work that goes into it. So thanks, Jack, to you and your team. And thanks, Gemma, for putting the great background into my talk. And it was really good to see from Gemma a lot of the background to the work that needs to be done before you actually get out there and ask the questions. So that was really good. We often don't have that time to explain the background work. But yes, I'm talking about conserving threatened mammals in the Otways and looking at significant refuges. It's really a continuation of a report last year where we've advanced our understanding of where the refuges are. I'd like to thank my partners in this presentation from Deakin University and ZooSpec. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, what is a refuge and what's important about it. So these days, regional persistence of mammal populations is often reliant on the presence of refuges. Things are being fragmented, we've got impacts of climate change, etc. And these refuges are located in areas that are favourable environmental conditions for the species that you're considering. Usually they will also have high resource availability. And sometimes they might be significant because they protect from disturbances, things like fire, predation, thermal and water stress. It's too hot for these little small mammals if we're thinking about them. So you might be looking at things like long unburnt habitat, rocky outcrops and gullies, like older vegetation, which may protect from heat. So we need to understand the characteristics of the refuges in our areas of interest, how species use them, where they are across the landscape, and these are all essential to focus our management, particularly if we're talking about threatened species. So just I put the map up of the ecological vegetation communities across the Otways. The eastern Otways, Anglesey Heath, I put a circle around there to highlight it. That's about 7,500 hectares of heathy woodland. We've got all our different forest types, our dry forests, our wet forest, lowland forests, our cool temperate rainforest, and then here I've highlighted the Carlisle State Park that people have been talking about, which is about 5,500 hectares of heathland. And the Great Otway Park covers a lot of this, is about 11,000 hectares, and that was established in 2005. And along here, along the edges, we have things like coastal scrub vegetation, which you actually, it's so small that you can't see it, or you can see a bit of it. So coastal headland scrub, tussock grasslands, things like that, very small areas. So our work in the eastern Otways, we had long-term sites, and they were in heathy woodlands in the west, up here, heathy woodlands in the east, down this area here, heathy lowland forest, coastal headland scrub along here, sandy heathland and coastal dune scrub. So over a long period of time, we were able to look at the mammals in the area, and we have very healthy populations between 1975 and 2007. We had a rare and endangered New Holland mouse. It was in this area here. It was present at 17 sites. Also down here. We had the swamp antechinus predominantly in these areas here and present at 30 sites. And we had other species that had very high site occupancy and abundance, agile antechinus, white-footed dunarts, bush rats, swamp rats. There were significant declines when we came back to look at these populations from 2013 to 20. So one can see the mean maximum abundance of the small mammal communities in vegetation between 1975 and 2013 and 18. And in every situation, significant differences and declines. The only area that was maintaining the communities were these coastal scrub dunes, maintain the maximum abundance of all small mammals. And these were the dunes between Anglesey and Urquharts Bluff. There's the Great Ocean Road and there's the ocean, and swamp antechinus are not very good surfers, and neither are bandicoots. So quite a restrictive habitat there. Further, we had declines in New Holland mouse. We haven't had any captures since 2002. And the swamp antechinus, we only caught 8 individuals between 2013 and 15. So very low abundance. We had 67% of our sites had severe declines. And again, as I said, the only places we were finding good populations were in coastal dunes and gullies. So that was when we got the information that we think these are really important mammal refuges in the eastern Otways. So we started to examine, well, what are the features of these refuges? We looked at them and found that, of course, they all had dense vegetation, and that was vegetation that was probably pretty good at maintaining moisture. There was an absence of fire, and so these features would protect animals from predators. We also, with the help of Parks Vic and our colleagues from Western Australia, looked at microclimate of some of these refuges. For example, in the eastern Otways, the upper slopes had higher maximum temperatures of more than 2.8 degrees centigrade. The soil's surface temperatures were higher, and wind spread, of course, was higher than gullies. So they're more exposed, and so for a small mammal, that could have an impact. The coastal dunes, we also looked at plant available nutrients. And the plant available nutrients of things like phosphorus and nitrogen were so many times higher in the dunes than they were in the inland sites. And we think that that might be a consequence of things like marine inputs from guano and rack that's been coming up from the oceans. And if that's the case, your high nutrients increases food availability and probably increases the ability for mammals to reproduce. So we were finding there was optimal habitat for endangered species as well as other rodents, even in the presence of foxes and cat predators. So in the Wild Otways initiative, we extended the work and we started looking at refuges across the Otways. We've been doing camera surveys, live trapping, and we've even been doing scat trapping, which Phoebe Burns will talk to us about in trying to detect the presence of the broad-toothed rat. So one of the best refuges that we've located is indeed the Carlisle Heath, and our surveys and previous work in 2019-20 showed that we had high trap success in the gullies, much lower in the upper slopes, but the species diversity was really high. We found things like pots and bush rats and feathertail gliders, white-footed dunnites, pots, dusky antechinus. So a very diverse mammal community. And Kristen's work in 2021 was looking at, well, are they abundant as well as being diverse? And indeed, the small mammals were very highly abundant. And the swamp antechinus was most frequently trapped species. It was present at 72% of sites. And this was amazing because we hadn't seen any data like this in the eastern Otways since the 1990s, 2000s. So the refuge, Carlisle Heath, it's a big area and it's definitely a significant refuge. We found another refuge in the Painkalac Valley, which is at Aireys Inlet. We did some camera trapping, and we hadn't seen good mammal communities there since the mid-2000s. And in July, we actually caught swamp antechinus on camera down here south of the Great Ocean Road. It was a very exciting find. We didn't know that they were still there. And we did some live trapping in December. And sure enough, we caught swamp antechinus again on these areas here. And in July, we did the live trapping again in collaboration with Gemma and Kristen, and we caught breeding females. This is very exciting news. And I just wanted to point out that one of our breeding females was located here, just behind the goalposts on the recreation area. So this is a very important refuge. Obviously, we don't think there's as many animals, but we had also some interesting data in we didn't get any mammals in this red area here. So we need to go back and have a look at why that habitat is no good for mammals. Another area we looked at in collaboration with Parks Vic was at the Urquharts Bluff dunes. We looked at it in more detail, and they were controlling hakea in this area here, and they wanted to know whether or not they should control it. So we put in some camera traps. We got very few animals in this area here where the hakea was, but good and high numbers of animals in this dune habitat. In fact, very high numbers of swamp antechinus, so it's a very important area and refuge for them. However, we did have high numbers of feral foxes. Now, when we returned with Gemma and Kristen to live trap in July, we caught many bush rats and swamp rats, but we didn't catch any swamp antechinus. So it's likely that they were there when they were breeding and young, but they didn't survive. So this is probably a refuge that is being impacted by constant pressures. Despite the signage, the fencing, we have humans trampling the area, dog droppings, foxes, cats, the whole lot are impacting on this refuge. So our main aim, or one of the main aims, is not only locating the refuges, but is to map them so that our colleagues in DELP and Parks can actually know where they are. So we've been mapping them, and if we provide maps with to the fire people and Parks Vic, they will know how to treat these areas and what the priorities are. So we have got some inland refuges, our potential refuges, these very thin coastal refuges, and we've extended these down to Cape Otway. Again, all of these sites we've been finding endangered species and predators. So this work, hopefully, we will continue it till the end of this project. We're continuing to identify and map the refuges. Our questions are, how viable are they? Are they sources of animals like the Carlisle Heath, or are they sinks like the one that we looked at down here at Urquharts Bluff dunes? We also need to look at the appropriate fire regimes. Indeed, with refuges, there needs to be avoidance of burning, but how do you do that? How do you protect the areas so that if a wildfire comes through? I think a very important approach is for predator control to be at local scale and look at how we could best protect the refuges. That's where our best species and communities are. And I think we really need to think about how we do predator control. We have to have effective management of Phytophthora. And I think initially when we start working with DELP, FFM, they are looking for spatial tools that we can inform them about the refuges and how their animals work, and inform fire planning. And of course, we'll need to implement some monitoring for adaptive management and assess the role of reintroductions, which Gemma so nicely described previously. So thanks very much, everyone, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Barb. We're right on time, and there aren't currently any questions in the chat. I'm sure you'll get some though, so if you wouldn't mind, in the Q&A section, if you wouldn't mind keeping an eye on that, that'd be fantastic. Thanks for your presentation. I think it's fair to say that your work has been the spine of our data for a long time, Barb, so we all really appreciate the work you've done for so long.